Hey everybody, welcome to another mini workshop. This one's for March, and this is the time of year when we all start to think about the garden and the actual application of time and energy to start the garden in the spring, because we're getting new smells and the snow is melting for us, and whatever your season is, spring is a great time to replan what you're going to do in the garden this year. And so today I'm going to talk about seeds. I'm going to go through all the various seeds I'm using this year, what I'm looking forward to, and why I'm planting different types of seeds. Most of these are from the garden in previous years. These are all saved seed from the garden, which I do really suggest is a great practice to try to get into. I think about 85 or 90% of my seeds are from the garden from previous years. So even with the biennials, they're relatively easy to save seed the second year out. So it's a really great practice to get into, because you're getting better seed than you can buy. It's more acclimatized for your particular area, and it's fun. And you can share the seeds with people around your area, your family, your friends. It's great to have a wealth of seeds come out of your garden that you can just plant in perpetuity. Of course, these are all open pollinated varieties. You all know that, so that they grow true to type. But I am going to be using some hybrids this year on some tests for what's called landrace gardening. And that's when you allow seeds to kind of do their own thing. And you can take hybrid seeds and let them continue to make new iterations on each generation to see what you end up with, and keep saving for different traits from that plant the following year. But that's a separate thing. All these are open pollinated, and these all were stored over winter in the root cellar. And of course, seeds optimally should be dry, dark, and very cold, even freezing in some cases. So I think I mentioned this in a previous session, but these things work great. If you can find screw top containers like this is Talenti gelato, and we happen to like it, so we save all the containers. But they make the really good seed protected chambers for moisture protection. And then of course, if it's just bulk seed, I have it in the container by itself, but then you can put the dry paper envelopes so that the seeds breathe, and then you have complete moisture protection with these canisters. Sometimes if I get in a hurry, I'll just put them in a bulk Ziploc bag in paper envelopes, labeled with the year and the type, etc. But anyway, I just wanted to remind you, when you're saving seeds, don't keep them in the attic, don't keep them someplace where it's hot, where it can get hot. I talked to someone the other day who kept them in a trailer without any trees around it. And trailers can get pretty hot if you're not in them. You take a week off, you leave the house, trailers can get up toward 100 degrees. That's not really good for seeds. So make sure you keep them cool, dark, and dry. And while I'm on the subject, I wanted to mention a different way to save seeds that I tested out last year that actually works pretty well. And this is, I think they make them for cards or something, or there's all kinds of kits online. I'll put a link down below. But this one I just labeled with the various varieties, and they all come out in separately sealed containers. So it's kind of a neat way to do it. I don't know, jury's still out whether I like it or not, but it does work pretty well and protects all your seeds. Just a different way to categorize them. The limitation there is I can only fit a certain number of envelopes in each sleeve, and a lot of times I have so much going on that I might have a larger bulk amount where I'd have to put it in a full container like this to just make it easier. So, but if you have a smaller garden, this might be the way to go. These kinds of containments, really super efficient and easy. You can stash them pretty easily wherever you want, and readily available when you want to get to them. But again, today I'll be talking about the different categories of the plants that I'm growing here with these seeds. Most of these, like I say, all these bins are all saved from the garden. These are all the seeds I bought this year, and I buy different seeds each year just to try new experiments with different types of food to see what's growing well here, and some stuff that I've never grown before to learn more about these particular plants. And we should all be doing that, right? So plant some stuff you're not used to every year just so you keep learning new things. But I'm going to talk about these different seeds in terms of nutritional density. So if you look at just the base garden of whatever size garden you're growing, and just think about how much food density, how much nutritional density can I grow in that space. That's one category. And I have probably 25 or 30 types of vegetables that I grow, that certain varieties for me, I like to eat, good flavor, they store well or they grow well here, but they all have really high nutrient density. So for me, that's one of the main priorities, so that I can grow the most nutrition in the allotted space that I have, right? So if you have a 200 or 300 square foot garden, you want to see how much nutrition you can grow there. There's certain types of things you might grow over other things. So we'll talk about that and what those plants are that reside in that category. And then there are other things that are symbiotic, that have symbiotic relationships with the insects, the microorganisms, the plants, the canopy, etc. Like this one is full of nasturtiums, for instance. Now you can eat nasturtiums, the blossoms are edible, etc., but it's not a big source of nutrition for me. But I plant nasturtiums every year and save the seeds every year from those mature plants because they attract so many bees. They look beautiful. They fill out the lower canopy, so they're great to plant in between things. So there's structural canopy reasons and priorities. There's also the beauty and the beneficial attractant. So and most of the flowers would fit in that category, where they bring in all the positive beneficial insects. So I'm not going to eat the flowers in most cases. Sunflowers might be an exception, but they're going to be out there because they're needed to allow all these other plants to thrive and to keep other insect pests at bay. And we had a question last week that was about insect pests, and someone said, I have too many insects in my garden, or I have an insect pest in my garden that's hitting on a certain plant. And the answer for that typically is you need more insects, because if you create a little micro ecosystem that has enough diversity of plants and shapes and places for them to overwinter and habitat and all kinds of other structural things in your garden ecosystem, you'll attract enough diversity of insects where they'll keep the pests in check. The predator insects will take care of the other pest insects for you. So in certain cases, when people don't have enough diversity and they have this garden that might have bare soil, maybe there's very few other plants around, you can have a pest come in and it has no predators, so it just takes over. And in those cases, I say, bring in more insects because they'll take care of it for you. It's like, it's very similar to a population of deer that have taken over suburbia, and they're just eradicating plants and rose bushes and everything all over town because we've taken out the predators. We've taken out the coyotes and the mountain lions and things that used to keep those populations in check. So now they're a pest animal, right? So that's about balancing an ecosystem. And in your garden, of course, you don't have to bring in mountain lions. You just bring in other plants that attract the natural, local, resident insects that will do the work for you. So keep that in mind, and that's another category of plants and seeds that I plant around all the gardens. And with that note, I just wanted to mention this year I'm going to be taking a different tact on some of my flower attractant plants, in the sense that I used to put them inside the beds and alternate rows with, and like the way we do block planting, I'd put a few rows in the block of different types of flowers, for instance, to attract pollinators and predator insects. So this year I'm going to start prioritizing planting those on the exterior, on the borders around the beds themselves. And the thinking is that when I turn over that bed, when I'm switching plantings or I'm swapping things out, and I need to clear some flowers, I'm taking a habitat, a beneficial habitat for insects, and moving it out. And that reduces the amount of ecosystem services that they can provide for me. So if I have those on the side, on the border, near the pathways or off to the side as much as possible, then if I turn over a bed or strafe it to mulch it for the winter or something, I still have these other plants that are flowering maybe late season that I don't have to interrupt. So those insects that might be having a great time in the garden bed during mid-season, if there's activity or turnover in plants, they can jump over and have habitat on the side to live in and still have food, etc., while I'm working on some other bed. So keep that in mind this year if you're thinking about adding a lot of flowers. Sometimes they get in the way, the bigger ones, and so you could just put them off to the side, bring them away from the main bed, right? And all of these other things that we're going to be talking about, companion plants in the sense of symbiotic relationships with attracting pollinators and whatnot, with this diversity, is you don't just grow food based on the structural, like we said earlier, the nutritional densities by square foot, without enhancing that ecosystem with all these other plants that provide these different services to bring in insects that have a positive effect overall. So on the one hand, you don't want a rigid structure of just like an industrial mindset where you're just growing X number of pounds of food per square foot and that's it. Start with that thinking, that's good, but then you're going to soften it with all this diversity and flowers and herbs and different size canopies. So you're going to have low ground cover, you're going to have mid cover, and then you're going to have taller plants like sunflowers that go 10 feet or corn, for instance. When you start having those differentiations that create diverse habitats and all these interrelationships between plants and insects and birds, it's amazing to watch. You're actually blossoming this whole ecosystem. So that's what some of this seed diversity does for me, and that's why that's the second classification, is nutritional density first, and now I need all those partner plants, all the flowers and herbs and everything else, and I need some mid-sized plants and some really tall plants, and so keep the structure of the plants in mind. It's much like permaculture, where you're creating different canopies, different stories, and that's also important in a vegetable garden. So it's a really good thing to structurally think about when you're planning on your seeds in the spring. So I'll be kind of isolating. I'm going to have a list attached to this down below to give you all the seeds that I'm planting out this spring, to give you an idea of why I plant the ones I do. Now keep in mind, all these varieties do really well here, and they grew here to maturity well enough so I could collect the seeds from them. It doesn't mean they'll do well in Florida or Canada or Philippines or a lot of the other places that many of the members on this channel reside. So in your case, you'll have different local plants or different varieties that are more northern or southern climate for these varieties. But you can get an idea of the varieties that happen to work pretty well here in the high altitude southwest desert region that I'm in. And so just keep that variation up front when you think about ordering seeds. You don't want to just template the seeds I'm growing and expect them all to grow well wherever you might be. If it's a similar ecosystem and it's zone 6B, which is where I am, then go for it, because it'll all do really well here. But as you move through different zones, you might have to switch some of these varieties. And then there's also the classification of cool season and warm season crops, and of course for the warm season crops I'm going to be putting them out in soil blocks early on in the next week or two. So I'll put a little parenthetical group there as far as, okay, tomatoes for instance, I'm going to have to put those in soil blocks because I have a short enough season where we can't get away with just planting them outside and sowing them directly in the soil. So hope that helps this month to kind of get you tuned in to what you're going to plant, and think about the different categories of what these plants provide for you and how they all work together in concert to create these great ecosystems that we all enjoy. And part of what those ecosystems do is provide food for us. But there are other provisions that are equally important that subsidize or support the production of food. So it's important to bring in all these other ideas and plants and canopies and flowers and beneficial attractants and whatnot, so that it all works in concert, right? You can't have a symphony with just kettle drums. You need the violins and the oboes and the cellos and all these other instruments to make the whole symphony work. That's what we're doing here, is creating that symphony of seeds, if you will. Sounds pretty good, symphony of seeds. At any rate, I'll quit just babbling here and just go into the list, and we'll go one by one, or I might put certain ones in groups to give you my favorites and why I'm planting them out, and maybe some notes on what I'm thinking about that particular variety. So here we go. Okay, starting up, we have Hopi Blue Flower Corn, and many of you know I'm a big fan of flower corn versus sweet corn. It has higher nutrient value. It can be saved for long periods of time, really easy to store. And I like the Hopi Blue Corn because it has really large ears, easy to grow. They get 10-foot plants, and it creates a lot of carbon for your compost as well. So it's a very beneficial plant in many ways. Potatoes, I go for purple Peruvians. I do grow other types, but this is definitely my favorite because they're off the charts on nutrition. They're low glycemic. They're a little smaller potato than some of the Yukon Golds and bigger russets, but pound for pound, there's more nutrition in a purple Peruvian, and they do really well in my climate. Then as we move on to beans, I grow Hopi Black and White and Hopi Purple bush beans, and I grow those every year because they return nitrogen back into the soil, and they store really well. There's tons of nutrition. They're heart healthy, and they're really easy to grow and process, and they create a fair amount of carbon as well after the harvest. So beans are a favorite. I also grow green beans, and Provider is probably my favorite, and Provider does provide. They are a very robust grower, and it's a really nice sweet string bean, so you can eat them fresh. And you can also let it go to a dry pod and save it as a dry bean as well down the road. Next up, we go into squash, and in the winter squash category, I like Homestead Sweet Meat squash. It's a Blue Hubbard variety that is a large, sweet, orange flesh variety that I grow every year. And I also grow another one this year that I tried that's a little better than the pink banana squash that I used to grow, and it's called the Candy Roaster. It's that orange one that's the longer one in the bottom. And I also grow the Waltham butternut squash. Those are my three main winter squash. And then as far as summer squash, the Romanesca zucchini is definitely my favorite because they are just giant and they don't get bitter. You can overgrow them and they still are wonderful flavored zucchini. I tend to shred them up and freeze them, and then I use them as a zucchini egg fritter. So I bring those out of the freezer all winter and cook those up for breakfast. Moving on to wheat grain, I did the grain trials this year, and Camet was the winner. So I'll be doing that on a larger scale this year, growing a fair amount of wheat, maybe a couple hundred square feet, to get some grain into the kitchen in the wintertime so I can make some sourdough. And, grain takes a fair amount of room, but if you have extra room, it's a wonderful thing to grow, just for calories alone. Beets, I use the Early Wonder Tall Top and Bull's Blood. They both do really well. Lots of nutrition in the greens, so you can harvest the leaves. And then, of course, the root storage goes for 5-6 months, no problem storing these in sand. You can cook them up and either eat them cooked or dry them for later use as dried beet coins. The beets have an amazing amount of nutrition in them, so I grow them every year as well, and they don't take up much room. Moving on to broccoli, I use green sprouting calabrese, and they have pretty average sized florets, but they're just not very quick to go to flower, so I like holding on to those. And broccoli, of course, is one of those great nutritional powerhouses, so I tend to grow that every year as well. And the leaves of broccoli are edible as well, so keep that in mind. Of course, cucumbers I grow every year for pickles. I make about 25 quarts of pickles per year out of a very short section of fence line. I use Market Moors. They just happen to do really well here. There's probably 40 different types of cucumbers that you can use for pickling, so try one that works in your area. Carrots I grow every year at quantity. I've been growing Bolero storage carrots because they are a really sweet carrot that stores well. I'm now growing a Rhodolica that's an open pollinated variety, so I can save seeds and grow those in perpetuity. And Cosmic Purple is the highest nutrient dense carrot out there, and I'm going to be growing that this year. I actually purchased seeds for the Cosmic Purple this year, so I'll be planting those out and trying to grow the seeds in successive years to be able to have a closed loop on the carrots as well. And of course, carrots are not only great to eat all winter when you use the deep mulch process, but they're full of nutrition and a wonderful addition to any garden. Now, as far as garlic, I grow hardneck varieties, both Dugansky and Music, so you plant those here in the fall for about a June harvest. And garlic is one of those superfoods that's really good for the immune system, so I always have garlic and other alliums around to plant each year. And as far as the onions, this year I'll be planting some Ishikura green onions, and these green onions or spring onions are one of the higher nutrient-dense types of onions you can grow. I also, of course, have plenty of storage onions. I grow candy and Patterson onions typically. The candy onions don't last as long as Patterson's, but I like the flavor a little bit better. The alliums in general, the onions, the leeks, the shallots, the chives, all these things are super good for you, really strong nutritional builders. As far as the shallots, they have a super long storage life, and again, that nutrient value, it's worth planting some alliums wherever your garden is. When it comes to leeks, I plant King Henrys. They typically have about a 5-month storage capacity, and leeks are one of those sources of prebiotics that I talked about in a previous episode. So I grow leeks every year, and they last 5 months in the root cellar. This year I bought some Chinese chive seeds, so I'll be planting those out to see how they do here. I don't have the report on that yet, but I love chives, and they're really, considering their diminutive size, they're really a powerhouse of nutrition. Tomatoes, of course, are an all-time favorite. I grow several different types, and I grow a fair portion of them as cherry tomatoes and some full-size tomatoes as well. So the first one's up, we've got some indigo drops, these cherry tomatoes. I also grow Chadwick cherries and full-size tomatoes in terms of Nepal and black brandywines and all different types, and they're in the list there. But tomatoes are full of nutrition for you. They're really easy to store as tomato sauce or frozen. Now let's jump into some greens. Arugula is one of the closest to its wild relative, and it's really, really good for you, hence the bitter flavor. That's a signature quality of some of the older greens. So arugula comes out every year. I also grow a couple different types of Asian greens. I grow tatsoi and pak choi, and those are really easy to save seeds from each year, and it's a nice addition to the blend of greens that come out of the garden. Super healthy and robust growers. They don't take up a lot of room, but they're a great addition to any of your green blends. One of my new favorites is the Chijimasai Asian green, and it's not quite as bitter as tatsoi or pak choi, and it grows quite well here. It spreads out, and there's just these wonderful fluted leaves that add quite a bit to salads and stir fries. So Chijimasai is going to be something that's always going to be in my garden from here on. Of course, collards are a natural standby. I grow champion collards because they tend to stand out as really super robust. Insects rarely hit them, and if they do, they outlast the insects anyway. So it's a great nutrient-dense green that you can grow. Mustard greens, of course, again, really close to their wild relatives and super healthy for you. Early Mizuna is my favorite right now, and it's a wonderful grower. It's kind of a cut and come again mustard where you can just kind of clip it right at the lower part of the leaf and just keep coming back all summer, and those things will just keep growing back for you. And then kale, my favorite, of course, is thousand-head kale. I also grow the lacinato, but the thousand-head kale is just so huge. It grows up to 4 or 5 feet, and it's wonderfully sweet. It has really powerful set leaves that don't get affected by pests or disease very much. So thousand-head kale, of course, we know kale to be one of the healthiest greens you can get, so I add that to the mix for sure. And one of the old standbys, of course, is spinach. I grow Bloomsdale. It does pretty well here in the Southwest, and that's my earliest season green. Of course, it doesn't like the heat as much, so it's usually spent by midsummer. Orac, of course, is my spinach substitute. Orac is really good to grow if you don't want as much oxalic acid, and that's what's in spinach. And Orac has a similar nutritional profile as spinach. It comes out as about a 4-inch leaf. that's much like a spinach leaf. It comes in reds and greens. It grows as a plant about 3 or 4 feet tall, and you can kind of harvest the leaves as they grow off the bottom of the plant. And it's a wonderful alternative to spinach. It's one of the earliest self-germinating plants out there in the garden in the spring. It grows super fast and super strong, and it has these enormous seed heads at the end of the season, so you'll have a plentiful supply of seeds the following year. So orac is another favorite of mine. Large-leaf purslane is an edible weed, sometimes called golden purslane. I grow that out each year and harvest the seeds, of course, and plant those the following season. And purslane has one of the highest levels of omega-3 fatty acids of any plant in North America. And it grows wild in your garden. It's really wonderful to have around. So large-leaf purslane. Now, cabbage is super healthy for you. I make sauerkraut to make it last a little bit longer, but you can just save it in a root cellar in the head, and it saves, 5 or 6 months if you have a really good root cellar. But if you make sauerkraut out of it, it lasts that much longer. And of course, we know sauerkraut to be wonderful for bringing in those micronutrients and microorganisms into your immune system and increasing the diversity of intestinal flora. So that's always fun and good for your health. And then lettuce in general, you always got to have some lettuce around. I don't plant too much of it because it doesn't store as long as the rest of all these foods. But lettuce is wonderful fresh, and some of the higher performers that I've found in the recent years are the red oak leaf, the deer tongue, and winter density. It's nice to have a mix of lettuce and have a really dense planting in blocks for lettuce. And if you want it to last for long periods of time, of course, you'll be doing succession planting every 2 weeks or so. I also tend to plant a little bit of romaine because of the crunchiness. I love adding that to salads, and I use Paris Island romaine. It does really well for me. Now, as far as herbs, I love pesto, so I plant a fair amount of basil, and I'm using Genovese large leaf basil. And that gives me enough each year to kind of can enough pesto for the winter. Another herb I like is cilantro or coriander, and that's really easy to plant out. It has wonderful flowers, attracts a lot of insects late in the season, so it's also beneficial for that. And many of these, in general, attract quite a few positive insects. Dill, of course, is a natural grower out here. Grows like a weed. And it is, but it's also good for pickles and having dill seed around for breads and other dishes. So dill is just easy to spread around. You'll notice how here it spreads throughout the garden in different places and tends to self-seed quite easily. Now, these are 3 of the ones I'm buying this year that I don't have my own seed bank of, but I will on some of these if I do it successfully. First off, we've got the Mammoth red mangle beets, and mangle beets are historically for feeding livestock, and what I'm going to be doing is growing these mammoth red mangle beets that get up to 20 pounds to feed the chickens in the wintertime. It's really good nutrition for chickens, and they're just kind of an anomaly to have in the garden and have these giant beets growing. So I'll be trying some of those mammoth reds this year, and arugula wasabi. I'm growing that this year because why not? I've never tried it. It seems really interesting, and I love sushi, so I'm going to be trying to grow some of this arugula wasabi and adding that to a sushi dish. So that's just something that's whimsical. On the cabbage, the Sapporo Giant, I don't know that I can grow that here. It's probably too warm here for that, but I'm going to try it anyway just to see if I can successfully get a cabbage that size. And so here's just examples of things that I wanted to try, and you should always branch out certain seasons to try something new, and these are my 3 this year for trying that sort of thing. Now, as far as pollinator attractors and symbiotic plants to use, I use a ton of different flowers. Each year it kind of varies depending on what seeds I've got left over and what new seeds kind of come my way. But these are some baseline ones I use. The pensamins, Mexican hat, western yarrow, Phacelia, and nasturtiums, violas, pansies, sunflowers, marigolds, calendula, borage, and hyssop. Now, I want to mention the Phacelia, which grows, I planted it last year around my corn, and it was just this incredible bee attractant. It was one of the most active areas of the garden because this Phacelia understory was blossoming throughout the corn. And so it's a really wonderful understory in plots where you're trying to do weed mitigation or weed suppression. This Phacelia will outgrow most of the weeds if you plant it at the right time and give you a nice ground cover so that you don't have exposed soil in there. And the secondary benefit, of course, is you're attracting all these beneficial pollinators. Now, if you're curious what kind of flowers and plants and trees and bushes, etc., that will attract native pollinators in your area, you can go to a website that's been put together by the Xerces organization. It's xerces.org. It's spelled out here, and I've got a link in the list that's after this video. But basically, you can go there and find a regional list. You can click on your region, and it'll link to a list of many, many different types of pollinating flowers and trees and bushes and things you can plant around your home to attract beneficial insects specifically native to your area, which is really handy because they're really, really beneficial insects to have in your garden. So look for the link on the PDF after this video as well. All right, so I think that wraps things up for today. Just a reminder that it's really fun to save seeds. Let some of your plants go to full maturity and beyond so they do get a chance to seed out. And then what's really nice, like over here, for instance, I've got a seed bank of my most important seeds. And I have 4 of these. I'm not sure where that 4th one is. There it is. So right there is the seed bank of probably 25 of the most important crops I have that I grow every year. This is from 2 years ago. So I'm going to put this aside, and it's a backup. If something happened to all these other seeds or my garden flooded out early spring, I have replacement seeds for the entire garden basically with these 4 containers. So I keep a seed bank of that every couple, 3 years, depending on what seeds are in here, because sometimes certain seeds have a short shelf life. So that's just another idea to shoot for. You might have a seed bank of 1 of these after a year, and then eventually you have 2, but sometimes you get the entire garden so that you have a backup of all your seeds for the following year right there. And then the rest of the seeds you can mess around with or give some away or do different trials, but you know your baseline stuff is already ready for next year. It's really handy so that regardless of what happens with seed companies or your garden itself, you've always got replacement seeds for the entire thing. These are free and you can save them every year in perpetuity so you can replenish your garden. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and look at your seeds and start designing your garden for this year's beneficial food growing experience. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening.